I remember when I lost my mind. There was something so pleasant about that place. Even your emotions had an echo in so much space. Ooh, when you were out there without care, yeah, I was out of touch. But it wasn't because I didn't know enough. I just knew too much. That made me crazy. That made me crazy. That made me crazy. Probably. You are having the time of your life. Think twice. It's my only advice. 'Cause I think you're crazy. I think you're crazy. I think you're crazy. Just like me. I think you're crazy. Oh, I think you're crazy. I think you're crazy. Just like me.
My name is Anna.
My job is to make
Street. Soft blue sky, helium balloons float up away. Broad daylight, but with sunflowers in the rain. My mama said they used to be white pyramids. They float above the sand is slowly sinking in. Our foundations destined to keep crumbling. Just 'cause we started this with zero answers, I just can't build on something that begins like this. It's a blood diamond flawless, but for that one thing. this poor boy, all dressed up in white. Now how can he smile with a face of all eyes? He wanders the night through sneers and words snide, spinning round and round his precious mind like dizzy neon lights. Can anybody find out any other way? It's choking up his throat now and dripping out his mouth like liquid fighting dying sparks, like burning butterflies. These creatures are vampires. They're killing by the night. They're falling from the dead trees to silhouette your life. He sees this white face, brains limp, grey and cold. Trees grow in their throats and crystals in nose. His cellophane mask has filled up with smoke. Look through the holes in his eyes and see his red soul. Can anybody find out any other way? It's choking up his throat now and dripping out his mouth. These creatures are vampires. They're killing by the night. They're hanging from the dead trees like burning butterflies. I'm begging hands, knees, please, tangerine, come on back to me. I need tangerine, do this for me. Hands, knees, please, tangerine, sugar, honey, sweet. those leather grips came, those times you clapped and called for quiet, they've gone to hold you ain't that nice. He packs a fight on Paul to drip and make home bake perfume, sip froth from soft on Joe, snow guide down big clothes. Slick back their wiry mane, knitted slides. Deep trees sleep on the dank lawn and scratch the slate. You finger down their waxen line between your braids. The squeaky pain upon each breath, the plumber's leg. Ride my little pool, babe, I wanna take a chance.
And just to make it all clear, we want the same thing as you. This will all be over soon. Now here's a little pill, here's the truth. remind the slaves they ain't gonna make it out alive today. I said, hey, you poison the well, watch it all burn, take him straight to hell. He's got the whole world in his hands. It was nice to know you. We've all been damned. Come on. We've all been damned. Come on. Said, hey, you feed the machine, bring them all back down to their knees. No time to waste. Remind the slaves they ain't gonna make it out alive today. I said, hey, you poison the well, watch it all burn, take him straight to hell. He's got the whole world in his hands. It was nice to know you. We've all been damned. Come on. We've all been damned. Come on. We've all been damned. Come on.
Young like tulips, bone in your blue tints, lemongrass eyelids, smoke in your slick lips, chocolate chopstick, backbeat strut flips, swimming pool spaceships, light through the wave tips, hot sugar in the afternoon. I wish that we could be real too. Hot sugar in the afternoon. I wish that we could be real too. So cool, but we don't talk. Hotels and alcohol, blue paintings on the wall, hot rubber on the top. I don't wanna be around you, just wanna be like you. I don't wanna be around you, just wanna be like. Bath time, Cool Whip, watermelon juice kiss, Esprit gold rims, skin so sun-licked, Santal freshness, hologram glasses, put it on plastic. You never been desperate. Hot sugar in the afternoon. I wish that we could be real too. Hot sugar in the afternoon. I wish that we could be real too. So cool, but we don't talk. Hotels and alcohol, blue paintings on the wall, hot rubber on the In the quiet, I inside the storm.
mistakes are mine. Oh, it's 2020, so it's time to change that. So you go make an album and call it Dreamland. Last night all I think about is you. Don't stop, baby, you can walk too. Don't want, baby, think about you. You know that I'm never gonna lose. Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. Heat waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. Heat waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Usually I put something on TV, so we never think about you and me. But today I see our reflections clearly in Hollywood, laying on the screen. You just need a better life than this. You need something I can never give. Fake water all across the road. It's gone now, the night is come. But sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. Heat waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. You can't fight it, you can't breathe. You say something so loving, but now I gotta let you go. You'll be better off in someone new. I don't wanna be alone. You know it hurts me too. You look so broken when you cry. One more and then I say goodbye. Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. Heat waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. Heat waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. I just wonder what you're dreaming of. Sleeping still.
I will meet.
I just wish that I could give you that. That love that's perfectly
When I will meet someday again.
as you. Late nights in the middle of June. He waves been faking me out. He waves been faking me out.
When I will meet someday again.
Late nights
I knew that my life was
he waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. He waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. When you look 'em in the eye, look 'em in the eye, and you won't let it follow. You need to hook 'em with your eye, hook 'em with your eye, till he wiggles and wallows. Sleeps atop a bag of raven's legs, curled up right, snapping by his head. Takes his eye with a bop on pen, makes nunchuck with his tune-off legs. Wake up with a hatchet over your head. You wake up with a hatchet over your head. I can see you running, I can see you running. Gone in the blink of my eye, gone, gone, gone in the blink of my, in the blink of my eye. Gone, gone, gone in the blink of my eye. I can see you running, I can see you running. Gone in the blink of my eye, gone, gone, gone in the blink of my, blink of my, blink of my.
We're digging up hatchets today and sharpening the blades in case a stitch of hope remains in this hell that we raised. Hey, we're witnessing the waking of the dead. We're ripping all the wires from our heads. Hey, we're pumping all the poison from our veins, scrubbing out these wicked stains. We're burying mercy and grace in unmarked shallow graves. Today the piper must be paid for the tune that he played. Hey, we're witnessing the waking of the dead. We're ripping all the wires from our heads. Hey, we're pumping all the poison from our veins, scrubbing out these wicked stains. Hey, we're witnessing the waking of the dead. We're ripping all the wires from our heads. Hey, we're pumping all the poison from our veins, scrubbing out these wicked stains. Let us pause and be thankful for this evening and the fact that we are breathing. Maybe living has a meaning after all. There's a plan for us lunatics and liars. We have faulty gears and wires. They can't save us, but they'll do the best they can. Let us pause and be thankful for this evening and the fact that we are breathing. Maybe living has a meaning after all. There's a plan for us lunatics and liars. We have faulty gears and wires. They can't save us, but they'll do the best to save us. They'll do the best to save us, but they'll do the best. Can't save us, but they'll do the best they can. We're witnessing the waking of the dead. We're ripping all the Just a moment, dear, I hear someone at the door, and the beating of a heart that I hid beneath the floor. They've come for me, love. Save yourself, I am far beyond repair. They will bury me alive, but I'm not inclined to care. I am too far gone now. So dry your eyes and count to 10. They'll have me on the pyre by then. Forget the man I used to be. You move along more easily. A moment's here, I hear someone in the hall, and he's plundering the promises we hung up on the wall. Oh, he's come for us, love. Save yourself, I am bitter to the bone, and I'm growing rather fond of the wandering alone. I am too far gone now. So dry your eyes and count to 10. They'll have me on the pyre by then. Forget the man I used to be. You move along more easily. Now I must finish what I started. I'll write a symphony for the departed. I have no time for second chances, so I survive on burning blood and backward glances. Oh, so the scene begins. Your cries become the wind, a desperate plea best left unheard. Then my contrived goodbye, a poet's pantomime, a drunken jester's final words.
You and I will meet
There's someone at the door, beating my head beneath the floor. Come for us, love.
you.
I must finish what I started. I'll write a symphony for the departed. I have no time for second chances, so I survive on burning blood and backward glances. Oh, now I must finish what I started. Oh, I'll write a symphony for the departed. Oh, I have no time for second chances, so I survive on burning blood and backward glances. So dry your eyes and count to 10. They have me on the pyre by then.
I knew that my life was now better.
You and I will meet someday again too.
I knew that my life was now better.
You and I will meet someday again too.
I knew that my life was now better.
You and I will meet someday again too. You You and I will and I will meet
Just a moment, dear, I hear someone at the door, and the beating of a heart that I hid beneath the floor. Oh, they've come for me, love. Save yourself, I am far beyond repair. They will bury me alive, but I'm not inclined to care. I am too far gone now. Oh, so dry your eyes and count to 10. They'll have me on the pyre by then. Forget the man I used to be. You move along more easily. A moment's here, I hear someone in the hall, and he's plundering the promises we hung up on the wall. Oh, he's come for us, love. Save yourself, I am bitter to the bone, and I'm growing rather fond of the wandering alone. I am too far gone now. Oh, so dry your eyes and count to 10. They'll have me on the pyre by then. Forget the man I used to be. You move along more easily. Now I must finish what I started. I'll write a symphony for the departed. I have no time for second chances, so I survive on bourbon, blood, and backward glances. Oh, so the scene begins. Your cries become the wind, a desperate plea best left unheard. Then my contrived goodbye, a poet's pantomime, a drunken jester's final words. Just a moment, dear, I hear someone at the door, and the beating of a heart that I hid beneath the floor. Oh, they've come for us, love. Now I must finish what I started. Oh, I'll write a symphony for the departed. And I have no time for second chances, so I survive on bourbon, blood, and backward glances. Oh, now I must finish what I started. Oh, I'll write a symphony for the departed. Oh, I have no time for second chances, so I survive on bourbon, blood, and backward glances. So dry your eyes and count to 10. They'll have me on the pyre by then.
In the summer, took my gun and made him go to Neverland. He was something, my old husband. He had all you ever want. Did you say something? What you say? Was that your voice or was that me? Little voices, buzzing poison, backward noise from everything. Dr. Swan goes, says and psycho, says they all from Neverland.
Dirty dust and say so and playing ball with Dizzy Jim ain't never spoken, whispered back you muttering. My heartstring was broken, it was me. I pulled a stretch in fun and way. In the summer silence, I was getting violent. In the summer silence, I was doing nothing. In the summer silence, I was getting violent. In the summer silence, I was doing nothing. Play with me, my love, in the summer sun. I'll be waiting in your favorite Cheshire grin. Lay with me, my dear, in the evening clear. I'll be dreaming in my pale skin.
You and I will meet someday again. Too. You and I will meet someday again. Too.
In the summer silence,
You meet someday.
in the summer silence, I was doing nothing. In the summer silence, I was getting violent. In the summer silence, I was doing nothing. In the summer silence, I was getting violent. In the summer silence, I was doing nothing.
Welcome, won't you come inside? Oh, I fear the passing year did not deserve you by some devious design. Suddenly you're very near as I prefer you soaked and shivered from the rain. You have always been a delicate disaster, fine in fire and a frame. Me and you are overdue for fiendish laughter. Oh dear, let me see those smoky eyes, 'cause you're a villainous thing and we can't have you living alive. Oh dear, let's remove those pretty clothes, 'cause you're a villainous thing, and I don't think anyone knows. Oh, oh, oh. Waste no worry for the world. Let it be a tragedy of love and glory while they wait by gates of pearl. We'll be building palaces in purgatory. Oh dear, let me see those smoky eyes, 'cause you're a villainous thing and we can't have you living alive. Oh dear, let's remove those pretty clothes, 'cause you're a villainous thing, and I don't think anyone knows. And you'll find no ever after here. It's clear that isn't what you came for, and I'll be your puppeteer on this delightful little detour. And you'll find no ever after here. It's clear that isn't what you came for, and I'll be your puppeteer on this, on. Funny how it's easier to see the forest for the trees when winter steals the leaves. There's many ways to hide a heart that bleeds, but I prefer the ease of rolling up my sleeves. You got some nerve to be coming around, a smile on your face and your feet on the ground. Oh, I used to be someone that you could believe, but it's been a while, been a while. You got some nerve to be coming around with that card up your sleeve and those thorns in your crown. Oh, I used to be someone that you could believe. Been a while, been a while. Good luck, Godspeed. I know I'll see you again. Good luck, a song. You got some nerve to be coming around with a smile on your face, your feet on the ground. Oh, I used to be someone that you could believe, but it's been a while, been a while. You got some nerve to be coming around with that card up your sleeve and the stars in the crowd. Oh, I used to be someone that you could believe. Been a while, been a while. Good luck, Godspeed. I know I'll see you again. Good luck, Godspeed. I know I'll see you again. Let me not make me word.
You and I will meet someday again too.
Let me
You
not make
and I will meet someday again too. You and I will meet someday again too. You and I will meet someday again too.
Godspeed. I know I'll see you again. Good luck, Godspeed. I know I'll see you again. Good luck, Godspeed. I know I'll see you again. Good luck, Godspeed. I know I'll see you again. Good luck, Godspeed. I'll always call you a friend. Indeed.
Burning in the coconut or sitting on the floor. Coco said to Maniac, I can't do this anymore. Everything we're doing just feels fucking cold. Everything we're shooting is just fake B-roll. B-sides, killing time, filler, that's all. How did this happen when we were so close? How did this all go so P-tongue? When it all started, I thought we would grow old. Living in the city with a baby and a dog. Doing school runs in a 4x4. I made pancakes and waffles. I could be a stay-at-home G.I. Joe. Patty said to Coco, you can't do this anymore. One day you'll see you're fucking wrong. Sometimes B-sides are the best songs. Sometimes killing time's hurry for a fall. I know I can't make you younger. I can't stop life moving onwards. I can't hide you from life's horrors. I'm not making you like your father. Too much quinoa and online shopping. Off-white Air Force Ones and boxes. You're a fucking coconut, can't even put them on. Even if you could, you couldn't even pull them off.
You and I will meet someday again too. I will meet
I know that my life was now better.
I stumbled out into the cold below a thoughtless moon. I saw the phantoms of my friends, but they were gone too soon. Then from the trees my enemies began to shout and shriek, until a silence overwhelmed them and I began to speak. Hear my battle cry, hear that mighty sound. That one before and many more will try to strike me down. Hear my battle cry, hear that mighty roar. And if you make it out alive, the devil will be waiting by your door. I met a stranger on my way to hear from God knows where. He won my lover in a dirty game of solitaire. He stole my crown and placed it crookedly upon his head. He turned around, I took him down to let the darkness in. You sacrifice the truth to justify your sins, but I don't need an excuse to let the darkness in. Hear my battle cry, hear that mighty sound. They've come before and many more will try to strike me down. Hear my battle cry, hear that mighty roar. And if you make it out alive, the devil
You and I.
I knew that my life was now better.
You and I will meet someday again too.
I knew that my life was now better.
You and I will meet someday again too.
I knew that my life was now better.
You and I will meet someday again too.
I knew that my life was now better.
You and I will meet someday again too.
I knew that my life was now better.
You and I will meet someday again too.
I knew that my life was now better.
You and I will meet someday again too.
I knew that my life was now better.
You and I will meet someday again too.
I knew that my life was now better.
You and I will meet someday again too.
I knew that my life was now better.
You and I will meet someday again too.
I knew that my life was now better.
You and I will meet someday again too.
I knew that my life was now better.
You and I will meet someday again too.
I knew that my life was now better.
You and I will meet someday again too.
And welcome back to Terrible Lizards, and we're going to get all spiky today, and all neck shieldy, and all stampy.
Yes.
That's a good clue to what's got coming up. I could have said horny, but I think that would have been inappropriate because we're going to be talking about not Triceratops, but another ceratopsian. And don't worry, it's not one of the little boring ones.
Yes, we skipped on from Psittacosaurus and we're now on to Torosaurus.
Ooh, Torosaurus. So, okay, Torosaurus in my head, like, it's the one, it's got two big horns, isn't it? Isn't that,
Yeah,
is
so
that the one I'm thinking
so
of?
when you said it's not Triceratops, that ultimately is what the crux of this episode is going to be about, which is kind of why I wanted to talk about it. So, picture Triceratops in your head.
Oh, yeah.
That's more or less Torosaurus. They lived at the same time. They lived in the same place. We have found Torosaurus and Triceratops in the same fossil beds. So very late Cretaceous, very, very late Cretaceous.
Right there when the meteor struck.
Probably, yeah. Though, as well, Torosaurus is pretty rare, so we don't have as many of them. And Triceratopses are actually around for quite a while. So it's perfectly possible that it was there, but I don't think we've got any Torosaurus that are right up at that boundary yet. But definitely close to that time. North America, so southern Canada through to, I think there's one in Mexico, western side of the North American continent. So broadly similar to Triceratops in distribution, basically the same as Triceratops in age, very similar in size.
But it's not it's only got 2 prongs.
No, it has got a nose horn. It's just not very
Has
big.
it?
Yeah.
It's got a stunted
It's got a little nose horn. And the thing that really makes it different, which of course is true of a lot of ceratopsians, is the frill. And if you remember back all the way to series 1, I want to say episode 2, we did Triceratops.
No, I think that was
Diplodocus. It was definitely one of the first few. Triceratops is weird in that it has a solid frill, and no other ceratopsian has this. And Torosaurus doesn't have this. Torosaurus has a big pair of holes in the frill, exactly like you'd expect in every other ceratopsian. And the frill is pretty long. There's been all kinds of arguments about just how long it is, and there's a couple of probably rather dodgy reconstructions that show it just going on and on and on and on. There's this kind of giant oval that never finishes. One time it was regarded as having like the largest skull in history. It doesn't, because there are whales with bigger skulls, but then that became the largest land animal in history, and maybe, certainly. But there's a couple of things out there as like, it has a 3-meter long skull, and A, that includes the frill, which is already cheating a little bit, and B, that's an upper estimate of what's probably a bit exaggerated.
So if is that why it's got the holes then, to reduce the amount of weight, or is there another reason?
Well, that's always been an argument for the fenestrae, which is the proper anatomical term for those in the frill in general, is that, yeah, it's a weight reduction device because it's this giant sheet of bone. And as we've discussed, if it was supposed to be armour, obviously brackets except Triceratops, because Triceratops is clearly doing something weird, but if it's supposed to be armour, you don't really want holes in it. The idea that frills in general were some kind of defensive mechanism, it's like, medieval knights did not, that armour was heavy. They did not cut big holes in it to save weight because of the obvious problem of cutting a big hole in your armour. Not quite so defensive-y anymore once you've done that.
But wouldn't it, if they were in the right place and you pierced them, and then you'd have locked your enemy together next to you, a bit like antlers lock.
Well, you'd probably just
well.
rip a hole in some relatively thin skin. I mean, it would have been pretty thick and tough skin, actually, but of course, compared to a sheet of bone, not a lot. Torosaurus's frill is also pretty thin compared to Triceratops, or at least thinner. And that really is the main difference between them. So the Torosaurus has got a smaller nose horn, longer frill with bigger holes in it. And if you also remember, there's little spikes around the edge. And Torosaurus also has a different number of spikes around the edge that Triceratops does.
Okay.
There's other subtleties as well, but those are the big ones. And then this is where we get into the meat of this. So back in, I want to say 2009, 2010 kind of time, there was a paper came out by John Scannella and Jack Horner, basically arguing that Torosaurus is basically just a big old Triceratops. And when Triceratops got old enough, they would look like Torosaurus. And I think it is fair to say that hasn't gone down great with a large number of paleontologists, and I would include myself among them. It is also one of those ideas that, stuck instantly. And again, there is, we've talked about this with scientific papers. There is a technical scientific paper that was peer-reviewed and yada, yada, yada. It's a serious hypothesis that should be considered, but...
You think it's wrong.
Well, no, but it's more that I think we have talked about this before, but I think people think that whatever is the most recent paper is right, and that's not really how science works. We talked about that with the Spinosaurus paper. Because
the most recent one is your paper.
Yeah, so it's definitely right, and everything else is wrong. But you get that from people, and so I see time and again it's like, oh, Torosaurus is really Triceratops. No one's disproved it, and that was the last time anyone said anything about it. And it's like, well, they never proved it in the first place, A. B, several people have written papers disputing key parts of that hypothesis, so you're wrong on that front as well. And C, you don't necessarily have to write a paper to prove something's wrong for that idea to be discredited or fall out of favour. There was a paper 10, 12 years ago that came out about the physics of other planets and Earth-like planets. And literally in the last line of the paper, it was literally a planetary physicist physicist went, and of course evolution could potentially proceed the same way in these other planets, and maybe there are dinosaurs. And he's just like, I'm sorry, did you just conclude there are dinosaurs on other planets in other parts of the universe on the grounds of how you think evolution works? Oh boy, you should not be writing that. I think it's fair to say that no one ever has written a specific rebuttal paper to suggest that that's wrong.
Oh, so it's true.
And no one thinks it's right. Yeah, right, but no one thinks this is true. You don't have to respond to a paper for it to be wrong and rejected by the scientific community.
Okay, if the universe is infinite, Dave, if it is actually infinite, there are dinosaurs on other planets mathematically.
Yes, I think you'll find that's not quite what they mean.
Or we could get a sparrow and ping it into space.
Just a really, really big catapult.
Unlucky sparrow. Dinosaurs in space.
Well, or lucky. First in space, you know.
Yeah, well, still. You could put a sparrow in a rocket with a billionaire. There you go.
But has there been one? Because I mean, we all know about the dogs and chimpanzees that went up, but various, they've taken ants and goldfish and some other. There were geckos. Wasn't that one? The Russians took some geckos up and they got out and were running around the space station. You'd think someone would have taken a bird by now.
I know.
Has there been a space dinosaur?
I know somebody smoked on the in the space station once. So the International Space Station.
God.
Yeah, they had a cigarette, and the smell is still there slightly because you can't get rid of it.
Get rid of it? Yeah, I bet it is. God.
Yeah, but there we go. Don't smoke, kids, particularly on the space station.
On the ISS, which is crumbling as it is. Anyway,
off the subject of space dinosaurs, back to Torosaurus.
Triceratops, Torosaurus.
Yeah.
So
tell me about before explain to me. You think, yeah, okay, they think it is turning into this. Is there any biological reason why one species would suddenly change into another? For example, I happen to know that like grasshoppers turn into locusts, or if you get a domestic pig and put it in the wild, it beefs up, it gets wiry, it grows tusks. All of these things happen in other species. Why is it so unreasonable that a Triceratops couldn't turn into a Torosaurus?
Well, that's the interesting thing. So it's not unreasonable as a fundamental concept. As you say, there's lots of things like that. I mean, if you want to take an extreme example, tadpoles turn into frogs and caterpillars turn into butterflies. Animals often change dramatically as they grow. That's not an entirely weird thing. We've talked already about Protoceratops and my work on that, showing that frill changes shape quite dramatically as it grows. That's totally a thing.
Can I do a side thing and ask really quickly?
Yes.
Where's
this guy? I don't trust that. I don't trust that expression. I know the listeners can't see it.
It's not dinosaurs, but it is zoology. So
yes.
I heard that there's a theory going around that caterpillars, and it's kind of been debunked, but it's not really, that caterpillars and butterflies are separate species originally.
Yeah, so there's a classic example of someone publishing something absolutely insane and basically getting away with
it. This is it. Why can't we have Velociraptors on Mars? And
the guy who argued that. So there's a guy who basically said that caterpillars were worms, and then they basically combined with other animals, and that's how you get butterflies. But the thing is, he got it into a really high-end journal because he was an editor on that journal. And at the time, the journal had a policy that editors could publish their own papers without review. That was literally the paper which stopped that policy, curiously enough. I want to say it's the same guy. I'm pretty sure it is, but if it's not him, it's someone who definitely buys that hypothesis, has a website up where he has his list of everything that's turned into everything else. And it's like Stegosaurus turned into pangolins and ankylosaurs turned into armadillos, and it gets weirder from there. No is the short answer.
Okay.
It's that whole field.
I just wanted, because it's one of those things that you sort of hear about on the internet, and you think, oh, that's a really lovely way of thinking about things, and that'll make Dave twitch. So I thought I'd reintroduce that to the conversation.
Yeah.
So why?
No.
So, I mean, why do animals do that, though? Why do things like domestic pigs change shape and grasshoppers change shape?
Well, the pigs, it's probably a weird one because of domestication and how that works. But there is this long and short of it, though, of course, I'm far from a geneticist, is the idea of epigenetics. and the fact that, environment can influence how you develop. And a great example of this, I can't remember what kind it is. There's some kind of bullfrog that has these tadpoles, and basically, depending on the amount of food that is available, the tadpoles will grow differently. And I can't remember which around it is, but it doesn't really matter. Like, if there's lots of food around, they grow to one kind of shape and they tend to eat algae. And if there's no food around, they tend to go a different kind of shape and become carnivorous and start eating each other. Ooh. So you can take the same group of tadpoles, you can take the same group of eggs from one set of parents and just split them into different ponds, and the tadpoles will develop totally differently according to the local environment.
Jekyll and Hyde frogs.
And so you basically have these environmental controlled genetics. That's not the same thing with what we're talking about here. We're arguably talking about, again, the same kind of stuff I've talked about with Protoceratops and sociosexual signals when we talked about dinosaur behaviour. The fact that if you're a baby sheep, horns are largely irrelevant. What you need to do is eat and grow and get big enough that maybe one day you can be a ram. And once you are, that's when you need horns, and you stop growing yourself and start growing your horns. And you suddenly change.
Do you think that's why lambs are so cute, to try and stop us eating? Because they're so cute?
Well, it's not working well, is it?
No, it's not.
If that's the strategy, they need to rethink.
I think it changed Lisa Simpson into a vegetarian and lamb, so it did work in that case.
But
so...
one
still.
Yeah, but sheep still tasty lamb. Yum yum yum. So, there are various reasons that things will dramatically change shape as they grow. That's a perfectly reasonable hypothesis. Indeed, Scanella and Horner and others have also suggested that with Pachycephalosaurus, so the big dome-headed dinosaurs, which remember are actually really quite closely related.
The ones that live in the caves and don't want to hit their heads, so they've got really thick skulls.
So that's why they got their motorcycle helmet. So they proposed a fundamentally similar hypothesis about a series of Pachycephalosaur fossils that actually is largely supported and agreed with, and I would sit on that side as well. So it's not the concept of the hypothesis that people have a problem with, which you've seen some commenters on the internet going, oh, no one likes Horner, no one believes Horner after his scavenger. It's like, no, lots of people, including me, are happy with the idea that some of our previously separate dinosaur species are probably one, and they grow from one to the other to the other. It's the evidence for this particular case of Triceratops and Torosaurus that they have a problem with, because they've looked at the presented evidence and think that it isn't very good. And that's what I wanted to talk about, because, as I say, 10, 12 years later, still see it every few months going, oh, Triceratops is really Torosaurus, and people don't understand dinosaur taxonomy, and the paleontologists need to rename all their dinosaurs because of this one hypothesis from this one place. It's like, no, that's not what it is. That's not true. So obviously I'm going to do that in our podcast, and the people who already know this, because they already listened to this and would agree with me anyway, are not particularly going to be convinced, but it's interesting to talk about, so here we are. Yeah, it's like you get those things where people are like, oh, if you could have put one thought into everyone's head around the world for 1 minute, what would you do? And it's like, this would probably be high on the list. It's like, can we get rid of Nanotyrannus and Torosaurus, and can we stop talking about paleontologists don't understand taxonomy? Because we do.
You want to get rid of Nanotyrannus and say that they're just young tyrannosaurs. Tyrannosaurus rexes. Yeah. And then you want to say, actually, Torosaurus is its own separate species. It is not Triceratops.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, we talked about the taxonomy, the procedure of good taxonomy. So one of the things that's just come out from this, which is, again, no one ever said, is Triceratops doesn't exist anymore. It's like, well, it does, because the rules of names is the first one is kept, and Triceratops was named before Torosaurus. If they are the same thing, which they're not, but if they are the same thing, we'd be calling them all Triceratops, not Torosaurus. It's not just because it's the adult that name wins. So Triceratops exists regardless of whether or not you accept this hypothesis. But anyway, so Scanella and Horner's paper, what did they say? Well, they basically pointed out that the two things tend to live in the same place in the same time, and the analysis of various bones show that Triceratops tend to be immature development at some level. They basically had older bones.
So the samples that you found of Triceratops were of younger animals than of Torosaurus?
Yeah.
Okay. So, like, there's no baby Torosauruses going around anywhere. There's no... And
let's stop. You're jumping ahead. You're jumping ahead.
I'm sorry. You say these things and I have to question you.
Yeah, I know. Good scientific writing will lay out all the basics and then we'll go through them.
Okay.
So they live in the same time, the same place. Torosaurus skeletons seem to be older as individuals than Triceratops. How do you account for the holes in the frill? The idea being, so they looked at some Triceratops frill and showed that bone in the areas that would go on to become, they argue would therefore go on to become those fenestrae in the Torosaurus, was showing evidence of rapid change and remodeling and getting thinner. And that was kind of fundamentally the argument. And then they also kind of said, well, this was, a fairly rapid change, which is why we haven't really found any intermediates.
What were they saying? That their little nose bone had just worn away or fallen off?
Well, this is part of the transition, and as part of those changes, the nose horn goes, or at least reduces. And again, there are some things that, pretty much everything that I've just said is largely true, in the sense that they do live in the same time and same place. A lot of the Triceratops need to be juveniles. A lot of the Torosaurus seem to be adults. Inverted, and I'm using really inverted commas for juveniles. There are, 7-8 meter Triceratops that weigh 4 or 5 tons. But again, we've talked about this before when we talked about growth in dinosaurs. They don't grow like mammals. It's perfectly possible to have very, very large animals indeed that under one category you would call a juvenile. Matt Weddell, who I think we mentioned before, is a great sauropod expert, and he wrote this great piece on a paper I did on growth. Matt was one of the co-authors. I said, look, there are some, Matt's seen some sauropod species which are bigger than Diplodocus, and he's never seen an animal which you would call an adult by a standard dinosaur definition. Wow. They just don't seem to kind of quite finish growing properly.
They just get more and more grown up.
Yeah, but in a way. So they're still retaining some of those juvenile features in the way that the bones fuse and these patterns of growth, but they're clearly full size, and they're having sex and having babies, and we find eggs, and if you look for medullary bone, remember that signature of egg laying, you find it. So they're sexually mature and having babies. They just sort of retain some of these weird teenagery features. So when I'm saying inverted commas,
and immaturity.
Right, yeah, spiky hair, they dyed blonde. Yeah. So when I say juvenile Triceratops, there are some really quite small baby Triceratops, skulls that are 30, 40 centimeters long. But I'm saying even these really big things are not necessarily fully fused up, fully finished growing, or at that slowest growth phase animals.
So they're not the slowest growth, because I was going to say they're a bit like crocodiles, because crocodiles never stop growing, but they do reach adult.
Yeah, quite. So they would be on that growth trajectory of slowing down, but at this point, usually we talked about this. Various bits of the bones fuse together. They just haven't quite done that. You often get a change in texture on the bones. That texture change hasn't quite kicked in. It's getting there, but not quite there. So as I say, so all the things they said about these are basically true. The question is that strong enough evidence to say that these two things are truly distinct? Are truly the same, and it's convincing case that one turns into the other. And there are inevitably some fairly big problems with this, which is why a lot of people aren't very convinced by it.
I'm getting huge Clark Kent Superman vibes at the moment.
Well, the frill would make quite a good cape, actually, in Torosaurus, at least. If you could get it rippling in the breeze with the right colour on it.
Do Triceratops wear glasses? That is...
Well, they've kind of got those almost like little rings of bone around them, so they're not a million miles off. There's a drawing for the next round of drawings. We want Clark Kent Triceratops and Superman Torosaurus. He just pushed his quiff back and made it a longer frill. Yeah. So how convincing is this? Well, the obvious big question is, well, where are the intermediates? If you really we've got hundreds of specimens of Triceratops. Now, not hundreds of skeletons, not hundreds of skulls, but certainly hundreds of bits, and certainly dozens of skulls. If they're turning from one thing into the other, shouldn't you find one where the frill holes are just opening. Remember I said they had different numbers of spikes around the margin? Shouldn't you find some with an intermediate number? Or and at least in a couple of them, they shift from being an even number to an odd number. So you have to kind of like realign them as well, which implies like almost all of them might be changing.
That sounds uncomfortable if they were actually doing.
Yeah, it would be a very weird. You'd expect to find these like intermediates. The counter argument was maybe that growth change happens very, very quickly. That is possible. That would explain why we can't find them. If Torosaurus were these true adults, big adults tend to be rare. We've talked about that before. That would kind of line up. But you've got some problems like, why would they transition so quickly? If you went from no frill and no spikes to frill and spikes, that makes sense in a sexual selection context. And remember, we know Triceratops are fighting because we've got these injury traces from them that shows that their horns line up where they get injuries. They're actively fighting with their horns. If actively fighting with your horns is a big thing that you do all the time, suddenly changing that, why? Are the Torosaurus not fighting?
Maybe
that
it's
would be an odd thing for them to do.
Maybe they're like the wise elders of the Triceratops and they've matured past it. And maybe that's how they got the holes. There's too much fighting. And then their holes got worn down.
Yeah, but as you can see, you're struggling to explain why you do that. How is there an optimal fighting head size and shape for Triceratops and a completely different one for the rarer Torosaurus? And remember, Triceratops, we know, they're breeding. We have medullary bone for them. So are they then not fighting with Torosaurus? It doesn't fit with how we understand sexually selected and sociosexual signals to grow. It just doesn't. It also doesn't fit with what we see in other ceratopsians. Remember, we've got like embryos for Protoceratops, and you can see the frill openings. It's not like Protoceratops has a nice solid frill and then later on it opens up. Open frills are universal for ceratopsians. So while it's kind of odd that Triceratops doesn't have it, it's also arguably even odder that Triceratops somehow gets rid of it as a baby and then regains it as an adult. It's something else that no ceratopsian does.
Well, we do that. We cover ourselves in fur as embryos, and then, non-furry as children, and then furry again.
Right, but that's a near universal thing that you see like across mammals because it's this ancient ancestral trait. We don't see this in all other ceratopsians. Another part of the problem you've got is, I said that, they almost perfectly line up in when and where you find them, but not brilliantly. Okay, Torosaurus is rare, so the fact that we find places where there are Triceratops and no Torosaurus is pretty reasonable. If they are these big old rare adults, you're not always going to find them even if Triceratops is quite common. A bigger problem, though, is that there are places and indeed times where we find Torosaurus and we don't find Triceratops. If Torosaurus is the big old weird one and it's rare, shouldn't you find 10, 20, 50, 100 Triceratops for every Torosaurus you turn up? Rather than naught.
It's an old people's home. That's what it is.
Well,
they've moved on. The elders have gone to their magic coven of Torosaurus life that is... I agree. It seems an utterly bizarre thing. I mean, but they are found in groups because we had this thing with Triceratops that there's good evidence that they were solitary animals, and even there are...
You tend to find them on their own. There is one alleged adult, I say alleged, I think it's pretty certain is an adult group found together, but it just hasn't been described yet. As I say, I don't think that's a big secret anymore. But obviously
it isn't now.
Well,
you
yeah, I know. No, I think as an idea, it's definitely out there. But yeah, there's a couple of juvenile groups. Other than this one, all the adults are basically individuals, despite there being loads and loads and loads of them. But as I say, finding Torosaurus in places where we don't find Triceratops isn't a great argument. There's a couple of Torosaurus which or their bone texture, fusion, etc., are rather more juvenile, and again, juvenile in big quotes, more subadult-like, and a lot like what you see in a lot of Triceratops. There's a Torosaurus doing the rounds at the moment. So it's on display. I can't remember what museum it's in. There was a ton of photos came out of this thing a couple of months ago, and now by the time this comes out, 3-4 months ago, And it's a fairly complete, in really nice shaped Torosaurus, and its nickname in the lab is Tiny, and it's not an ironic tiny. It really isn't very big at all for a Torosaurus, or indeed for a Triceratops. And this, no one's described. I mean, there's photos of it online. The museum has put photos up. Again, I'm absolutely not giving away any big secrets, but certainly Mark One eyeball me looking at those photos, going, yeah, that's smaller than most other Triceratops I've seen. If this is only a big old adult animal, that one sure ain't.
Could have been a tiny Triceratops, though. It could have been a mini.
Well, it could, but it's you go back to the Christopher Hitchens' extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If you have to go, well, maybe it's because of that for every single line of evidence, it's clearly not a particularly strong argument.
It's Occam's razor, I think, is the
yes. So the simplest explanation.
Yeah.
So yeah, this growth trajectory isn't what we see in other ceratopsians. There's no reason to think it would occur like that. That's not what we see for sexually selected traits. They don't particularly well overlap in time and space, or at least in the sense that there are times and places that Torosaurus appears and Triceratops doesn't. The frill spikes is not a very convincing one at all, because they have to shuffle in all kinds of weird ways.
Why does their nose fall off?
Why does the nose horn get smaller? Because again, we see variations. So those spikes around the edge, we see variations in those numbers, but we've never seen one in Triceratops with the same number and pattern as Torosaurus. Surely that would turn up. The horns in Triceratops change as they grow. There are different horn shapes between different species of Triceratops, but I don't think anyone's ever seen the nose horn just kind of vanish for any apparent reason. And again, if it's useful in Triceratops, why would Torosaurus get rid of it? You'd think they're doing at least some things pretty similarly if they are literally the same species.
What I find really interesting about the frill and the holes and everything else is it seems obvious, therefore, if Triceratops is using their frill for shields, I mean, literally for protection, we've got evidence they're using it for protection, isn't it more obvious that Torosaurus is using it as sexual display or signalling or something?
But that's the thing. So, remember, these things can always be multifunctional. Elephants signal with their tusks and they fight with their tusks. You don't have to be one or the other. Well, but the obvious thing you think of is Triceratops is fighting with its horns and using its frill for a shield. And I'm not entirely sure it is using its frill for a shield, because these Triceratops and Triceratops injuries are kind of at the base, not in the middle or at the back. But let's go with that for now. If this is all about sex and competition and winning, and you've now got Triceratops with bigger horns, or at least a bigger nose horn, and armour, and Torosaurus without, if they have a fight, who's going to win?
Triceratops.
The one who's still got the spikes and the armour. So how on earth is Torosaurus ever going to win a fight?
It can use its head nodding to fan away, because it's got such a bigger frill. It could just just whisk it out the door. There you go.
Yeah. So enter the final piece of this awkward triumvirate jigsaw, which is Nidoceratops.
Nidoceratops.
So we have a third animal, and this is a weird one. So Nidoceratops was originally named Diceratops for two horns, because its nose is mostly missing. So a classic piece of taxonomy. They went, oh, it's like Triceratops, it's only got two horns. We'll call it Diceratops. It's like it's got no nose. How do you know it's only got two horns? But there was, I want to say it was a beetle, but it could be a fly that already had the name Diceratops, and you can't have two things with the same name. So eventually it got renamed as Nidoceratops. So Scanella and Horner suggested that Nidoceratops is something like the intermediate. It's got some features of Triceratops and some features of Torosaurus. Most notably, it's kind of got some weird holes in the frill, even though it's very Triceratops-like. The first problem with this is it does have holes in the frill, but they're really irregular. They're not in the obvious place that you'd see one each side in exactly the right point, and they're supposed to be at least partially pathological because it's got some kind of disease or injury going on. It's got one hole like all the way down the side, which like nothing else ever has. It does have a couple of holes in the main bit of the frill, but they're not in the same bit of the frill that Triceratops's frill is thinning in and Torosaurus Torosaurus's holes are in. So if this is an intermediate, its holes are in completely the wrong place. If you do a kind of shape analysis of the whole shape of the skull, you actually find that different sizes of Triceratops and we have a narrower range, but different sizes of Torosaurus don't overlap with each other, and nor does Nidoceratops sit between them.
You're just ruining this. You're ruining this for everyone.
Yeah, so it's not a very convincing intermediate, and it's also not very convincing that Triceratops turns into Torosaurus. And Andy Farkey, who I'm sure I've mentioned before, has wrote this great redescription of Nidoceratops and looked at it and concluded that it is its own genus and species. And yes, it's got things in common with Triceratops and Torosaurus, but that's not a big surprise. It's a pretty close relative that lived in the same time and same place. You'd expect it. It's like, well, we did this analysis of lions and tigers and leopards, and it turned out they're very similar to each other. Well, they would be. They're all big cats living in Africa and India. Well, tigers don't live in Africa, but this really shouldn't be a big surprise. So, the long and short of all of that really is that ultimately, the idea that Torosaurus is some big, weird, old Triceratops is really not very well supported. And, the arguments for it were never particularly convincing, and people have actually assessed these in some rigor at various times, these skull shape analyses, looking at these distributions of characters and shape and time and space and growth, and it's just not very strong. And I don't think many people agree with it.
Right, I'm just having a look.
At the time? Or...
No. At what animals have been to space. Okay. 10 animals that have been to space, according to Discover Wildlife. You've got dogs, monkeys and apes, mice.
Well, that monkeys and apes, so that's two different things at least already.
Well, exactly. Well, fruit flies.
Yeah, well, that's not a surprise.
I said dogs, tortoises.
Have they? Didn't know that.
In 1968, the Russians launched Zond 5 spaceship with a capsule carrying samples of soil and seeds, some worms and 2-step tortoises.
See, that's, I know the Cold War was a really odd time in terms of competition, but as second place goes, we put a man on the moon, we put a tortoise into orbit.
2 tortoises.
It doesn't do...
2 tortoises.
It doesn't have quite the same ring to it.
Frogs, they've been to, amphibians been up there. Spiders, they've been up. Fish,
I'm not surprised by that.
Obviously tardigrades, because otherwise...
We want to colonise the moon with something. What else would you send?
And then finally, nematodes.
Yeah, that's not a surprise. No birds.
Roundworms have been up there, but no dinosaurs. Somebody needs to take...
Give Bezos a call.
You want usually, pirates would have parrots and minor birds and things like that, simply because they're very efficient in terms of food. They can eat cereals, they're quite well kept, they only poo and wee out the same thing. They're good. You'd think they'd be perfect for space.
Just on principle.
I know.
You'd think someone would have taken a sparrow. Or a chicken, something that couldn't, a kiwi. Kiwi would have great fun. Let yourself go, mate, as high as you want.
It could fly. An ostrich would do damage.
Yeah, so small flightless bird.
But be very good at operating the controls, I feel. Very enthusiastic.
Anyway, so the last thing to kind of get this vaguely back on track.
Oh, yeah.
So much as with the kind of Nanotyrannus argument, and I want to deal with Nanotyrannus more thoroughly at some point, though that will be even more longer and torturous and going over all the same points again. What would be like the definitive resolution of this? And there are, of course, a couple. Like, if we found a really true intermediate, if you turned up with the Triceratops skull with those holes just opening up and all the little spiky bits around the edge melting or expanding or breaking and turning and the nose horn half gone, we'd have to have another look at that and go, ooh, might be right. Alternatively, if we can find a truly adult Triceratops that is, definitively adult in every possible way of its growth and frill fusion and all the rest of it, and it hasn't turned into anything else, that would pretty much kill that idea, as would, of course, a juvenile Torosaurus. As I said, there's this thing Tiny. Tiny's not very big at all, but it's still good-sized Triceratops size. Like a real, dining table-sized baby with a head that's only 50 centimetres long, comparable to the smallest Triceratops that we've got. That would be fatal instantly to this hypothesis. You can't possibly have them operating at that size.
Or even a Torosaurus nest would probably help.
Yeah, well, an embryo or anything like that. Yeah, that would obviously do it. Or even any just small enough skull with the fenestrae in it and a small nose horn would really be problematic. So it's not a done deal, but other than a few people who are involved in the original study and some of their students, I think it's fair to say there are very few people who really think that this is a strong argument or even the right answer. But there are gaps to fill in, and there's some fairly obvious ways, as I say, that could prove or disprove it. And I personally suspect, I know nothing about the research, I know no one who's working on it, I've seen a handful of photos, but Tiny might well be that specimen. So it could be that this is a matter of time before we get a pretty solid answer to the end of this.
I think you're Lois Lane and you're completely bewildered by it. You're just trying to convince yourself that you couldn't possibly love Clark Kent, but secretly do. So...
I never thought anyone would accuse me of that on this podcast. You're secretly in love with Clark Kent. This seems unlikely.
I'm saying, well, you already love Superman is the point, and then you can't admit that your nerdy office boy is actually Superman because he wears glasses and slicks his hair back. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, are you convinced? Do let us know. We have now for you.
No, please don't. We don't care. Don't tell us. We get enough emails
Dave.
as it is.
Tell Dave. It'll be great. And you can do that because at the end of the series, as you know, episode 8 is the questions episode, and we are coming up to that. So please do, if you have a question for Dave, write it now if you're very angry about this episode. And I think you've every right to be. But before we
you've got such a grin on your face. You're so happy with what
we've got a magnificent guest, which is the wonderful comedian and brilliant musician of everything. It is the magnificent Jay Foreman. Jay, thank you so much for coming on Terrible Lizards. It is absolutely wonderful to see you again and looking well and nice bedroom in the background. What is your relationship with dinosaurs? Because I know, we're already aware you've done a song about dinosaurs. But are you a fan of dinosaurs?
Well, I'm in the rather shameful position. I think I'm like most people in the world, where when I was a kid, I was enthralled by dinosaurs, and I had a big 3D book of dinosaurs that you had to put on these red-green glasses to see the dinosaurs leaping out at you, and I loved it. And then, like most people after the age of about 12, I started forgetting about dinosaurs. And I don't know why that happens to most people, but I'm on the wrong podcast to admit that it happened to me.
It didn't happen to Dave.
Or if it did, he's in the wrong job.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. But we've had this discussion before, but it's like I was never that obsessed by them because I was obsessed by all animals equally, and I just kind of drifted into paleontology rather by accident.
So, Jay, bear in mind that, this is your one and only chance to ask a real paleontologist an actual question about dinosaurs. Do you have a question you'd like to ask Dave?
Well, is it okay if I ask 2 questions? Because
Possibly.
I was trying to think of one, and I thought of 2 really good ones, and one of them breaks down into 2 parts.
Most people do.
The first question I've got is, what is the world's biggest dinosaur mistake? And what I mean by that is either what is the most commonly held belief about dinosaurs that has now turned out to be wrong, or, if it's a more exciting answer, what is the thing that was once thought about dinosaurs that has turned out to be the most massively embarrassingly wrong?
There's a lot.
Wow, that is a cool question. I think that for the first one, it's slightly not quite dinosaurs, but there's this kind of pervasive view that almost anything extinct, particularly if it's a reptile, then it's a dinosaur. And you can kind of forgive people for pterosaurs, the flying reptiles, and various marine reptiles that lived alongside dinosaurs and should be in those scenes and were doing things with them. Okay, you can see why people aren't necessarily bang on with the exact scientific definitions and stuff. But I've seen things like mammoths and ammonites and trilobites and saber-toothed cats described as dinosaurs.
That's annoying.
Yeah, that's... it's like pulling a snail out of the garden going,
I will meet someday again.
It's like, no, these are so ludicrously far away.
My life was
Just because it's extinct does not mean it's a dinosaur. That's not how it works.
And my thing is that dinosaurs
I will
survived
meet
the KT
someday
extinction. So 65 million years ago, a big rock hit the Earth, and all the dinosaurs died. No, they didn't. Otherwise, we wouldn't have birds now. Birds are dinosaurs, dinosaurs are birds. Hey, name a species of dinosaur. Tyrannosaurus rex. Yes. Robin. Yes. Dinosaurs. Same thing.
Yes. That is the other big one, but we've covered that God knows how many times.
I know, but it still upsets me that even when I tell people this in the pub, they look at me like I'm an idiot, and I'm not the idiot this time.
Yeah, I remember, oh God, probably about 10 years ago, BBC did a little, like a CBeebies quiz for dinosaurs. And I and all my colleagues got 9 out of 10 because one of those questions was, are dinosaurs still alive? And of course the answer is yes. We all got it wrong. So all the paleontologists didn't get full marks on the quiz aimed at 8-year-olds.
It's annoying. What was the other part of the question then? Hang on. What was the second bit?
Well, I was thinking more along the lines of the things that experts get wrong. So the thing that comes to mind for me is in Crystal Palace Park, they've got these wonderful, huge models of what they thought dinosaurs were like in the Victorian times. And interestingly, even though it's all proven that they've put the hands and feet and claws in the wrong place, they're not allowed to change them and update them because they're grade 1 listed structures. So I wonder what sort of things that, proper experts, paleontologists doing dinosaur podcasts 100 years ago, what have they turned out to be wrong about?
The bird thing.
Yeah, well, that's a big one, actually. So, yeah, I mean, the birds were originally dismissed as being dinosaurs. There was a big thing for a long time about what are birds and where have they actually come from. And there was this huge gap and no one could fill it. And a couple of people, most notably Thomas Henry Huxley, suggested it was birds. And everyone went, ooh, but there's this one problem, which is basically the wishbone. And they were completely wrong about that one problem. And they should have ignored the fact that they were they should have noticed that they were completely wrong about this. And we would have solved bird origins, 100 years ago, or even 150 years ago, if people had thought about it more correctly. I mean, the Crystal Palace stuff is a great example in the sense that, yeah, they're obviously hilariously wrong in hindsight. But those were designed at a time when we had a handful of bones.
I mean, you'd have to have quite big hands to hold up those bones.
Well, that's okay, that's a fair point. But yeah, we didn't have tons of skeletons. We didn't have complete specimens to work from. No one really suspected the depths of the detail that we'd be able to get out of them. Remember, this was pretty early days for anatomy and biology and the other natural sciences as well. So it would be easy to point to them and go, yeah, they're obviously rubbish and they should have known better. Some things they definitely could have done better at the time, but they're not that bad, all things considered.
That's the impression I get from those models, is because they're made in such a sort of hilarious, cartoony, or sort of almost smiley way, that they must have known at the time, well, look, this is about as accurate as we're going to get, but it's not supposed to be accurate. It's just a fun experiment of, hey, these are the things that we think might have lived millions of years ago. Aren't they funny?
Yeah, and some of them are very good and have really stood the test of time, though inevitably the things that we had more complete skeletons of, so like the marine ichthyosaurs, there's fossil giant deer there as well. We know what deer look like. It's hard to get that too wrong. But there's things like, I think there's a temnospondyle, so this is a pre-dinosaur, this is an ancient giant amphibian, which is really kind of flat. So think of almost like a crocodile. A big, long animal, 3-4 meters long, big head that's flat and really quite wide. And yeah, they've basically done it as this giant fat toad, because I think someone went, oh, amphibian, we know what they look like, and just did it as a frog.
Either they thought it was an amphibian, or they had in mind the kids playing in Crystal Palace Park, and they thought, well, this will be easier to climb on.
Yeah.
Quite possibly. I heard just the other day from a colleague of mine who's done some research into those models, actually, that there's a giant sloth model, so the same animal you see at the Natural History Museum if you've been there, standing up to a tree trunk. And apparently part of the reason that's in shoddy condition is at one point there was a bit of a children's zoo there, and for the goat enclosure they just put a fence around the giant sloth, and the goats just climbed up and down and all over this damn thing, which, as you say, is now a grade 1 listed building that used to be a goat climbing frame, which shows you perhaps a changing attitude towards our heritage in recent years.
But the best thing about that is where they put the iguanodon thumb. The iguanodon's thumb claw ends up on the iguanodon's nose.
On the nose. See, I wrote about that just the other day for my next book, and I think that's very reasonable. For a start, they didn't actually have any hands. Secondly, no one suspected that animals had spikes in their fists at that point. And thirdly, Gideon Mantell, who was largely responsible for that, was referencing iguanas. And of course, there are rhinoceros iguanas, which literally have a spike at their end of their nose. It's iguanodon. He literally thought it was a giant iguana. That's where the spike would go on a giant iguana. So it's nothing like as silly as it sounds. You'll see people go, well, of course he didn't know better. We didn't have the whole skeleton and he just stuck it on the nose referencing a giant rhino. It's like, no, he was referencing rhino iguanas specifically. He wasn't stupid enough to go, oh, well, I'll make it look like a rhino because it's a big mammal or a big herbivore.
The amazing twist would be if it turns out in 200 years' time that the Victorians were more accurate than we are now, and they really were smiling all the time.
Yeah, I guess, we get things that come and go. Like I said, the idea that birds of dinosaurs came up, went again very quickly, vanished for a long period of time, and now resurrected. And this is the problem when you've got limited data. I think people have this idea of paleontology in particular and science in general as these kind of shifting sands and, oh, well, they told you that last week and now they tell you that this week. Well, with paleo in particular, we've got like 10% of the data most of the time, if we're lucky. And therefore, it doesn't necessarily take very much to tip it over one side of the seesaw or the other. And then it also doesn't take much to tip it back the other way. So, yeah, we end up changing our opinion based on the available evidence.
But how quickly does it change? For example, if they tried making Jurassic Park now, how different would it look? What's the biggest mistake in that film, other than suggesting it's possible?
But that arguably is the depressing thing about the recent ones, because, when they first announced the new Jurassic World, and there was lots of people kind of going, well, cool, can we see updated dinosaurs? It's been 30 years, let's have the latest scientific evidence. And then they came out and they were pretty awful. And the kind of defense of the filmmakers, which I would totally get, was they went like, yeah, but it's set in the same world, it's set in the same universe, we're showing you the same animals because it's those same animals that those people are experiencing, which would be fine were it not for the fact that they've basically changed them in every single film. And sometimes quite dramatically, and often they've made them actively worse. I mean, the Stegosaurus is the classic example. There's Stegosaurus shown in The Lost World, so the second one of the original trilogy, and it's a fantastic model of a Stegosaurus. If you could use it tomorrow, I'd be delighted with it. And instead, the ones you see in the most recent film, it looks like something from King Kong from the 30s. Its tail is dragging on the ground, its plates are in the wrong place, its back shape is wrong, its leg length is wrong. And it's like, so these aren't the same animals at all, are they? You've actively turned them into something that's 70 years out of date. Great. Well, if you're going to do that, why don't you make them right?
It's quite frustrating, and it's the little things as well that really upset paleontologists. Things like all the velociraptor hands do this, and that is an animal with broken wrists. They would have gone that way.
This doesn't work on a podcast.
I know, but I'm entertaining Jay. Look, I'm doing the floppy hand thing.
As an example, so I literally saw Aquaman last night.
Did you get his autograph?
No, unfortunately. I literally only just saw the movie Aquaman last night, and that's got a couple of little shots of prehistoric world with dinosaurs and pterosaurs in it, and they're genuinely better than the ones in Jurassic World. These throwaway shots in the background just to go, yeah, there's dinosaurs here, in Aquaman are better than the dinosaur-centric movies.
I guess the makers of Jurassic Park, they're not necessarily thinking of what's the most accurate dinosaur we could do, but they're trying to tell a story about scary dinosaurs. And if they have the option to choose between big, scary scales or cute, fluffy feathers, they'll go with the scales. Scales versus feathers being the first example that comes to mind, even though I'm sure that's wrong.
Yeah, no, it is for a lot of them. Velociraptor in particular would have looked just like a big chicken. I mean, a fully feathered large bird
with wings.
And as I say, I agree if that's what they were doing, but they keep kind of changing their own justification and then don't live up to their own explanations. One of the producers or even the director said something like, "Oh, well, our explanation is that they can't put feathers on these animals because they don't have the genes and they haven't been able to do it." And then there's that shot in the first one where they see the experimental lab of all the animals that haven't been released yet, and there's a lizard with feathers on it. It's like, so you can do it then. It's in your film. I saw it. It's not much of an excuse.
I wonder if it's because feathers are harder to animate. It's not that they're not made. Well, it's partly because it was back in 1993. It would have been harder to make feathers look good.
It was back then, but not now.
But I guess also you can't really make a befeathered animal look as threatening. And if that's a whole part of the film.
Well, the usual answer is, have you ever been attacked by a chicken, let alone a cassowary? Yeah. It's pretty intimidating when they get going.
I was a student in York, which was apparently the only campus in the world where students are outnumbered by geese. So we got used to it there, and they are vicious.
Yeah, quite. If they're Canada geese, there's that lovely joke I've seen in the last couple of years that the reason the Canadians are so nice is every time a Canadian is born, all their anger and hatred is transferred to a goose. And that's why Canadians are lovely and Canada goose are evil.
Just because I don't know the answer to this question, it's just popped in my head. Do Canada geese migrate to Canada? Or is that...
No, they're invasives, basically.
Okay.
They're like grey squirrels. They've been brought over, so we're stuck with them.
But were originally Canadian?
Oh, yeah. In Canada, there's tons of them. They're absolutely everywhere. as they are here, in fact.
Well, it's this whole thing. 'Cause we used to think barnacle geese.
Barnacle geese turned into barnacles or something ridiculous, or that was their eggs.
We used to think because the barnacle geese used to go away and nest and everything else. We never saw them nest, but they used to go away, and then just before they came back again was the time we got a lot of storms, and all the barnacles would wash up on the beaches, and so people thought that the barnacle geese came from barnacles, hence barnacle geese. And I thought that might be a bit like Canada, but apparently Canada, that's where they're from.
I don't think so. Well, there's that story that the same thing with storks. Storks would be around absolutely everywhere and then would vanish. And we knew that there were storks in Africa, but what we didn't know is were the storks in Africa the storks we had in Europe? And that was always a question. And apparently this was resolved in something like 1870 or 1890.
Please tell me this involves a paint gun.
No, a stork turned up in Germany with a Maasai spear stuck through it, which kind of suggested that it had flown over from Africa.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Jay had another question because we're massively off topic.
Yeah. Well, my other question's a lot more basic, and I assume that someone has asked you before, but just in case they haven't, which dinosaur makes the best pet?
No, I don't think we've had that.
No.
Oh, really?
We had Alistair Beckett King asked which would be the best one to ride, which is clearly a related question at some level, but definitely different. As a friend of mine, John Conway, did a little poster of dinosaurs as pets as just the kind of thing you'd see in a vet's office.
Nice.
If you went there and they're like, here's your rabbit, guinea pig, hamster, dog, cat thing, and he did one of dinosaurs. The first problem, of course, is most of them are quite large, and you probably don't want something that weighs several tons. Although we have dogs and cats, a lot of the small carnivores are potentially pretty vicious. Again, as anyone who's kept chickens or parrots would know, an unhappy parrot is not an animal you want to have to wrangle with regularly. One of the little herbivores, and ideally something that's going to be relatively free of sharp bits. If it's your first attempt at taming it, I'd probably pick something like Aquilops. So Aquilops' name means eagle face, and it's a very early ceratopsian. So
it doesn't sound very friendly to wake up to in the morning, an eagle face.
Yeah, I know. It's so it's a ceratopsian, so it's part of the same group of Triceratops and all of its relatives, but a very early animal. So first of all, really tiny, couple of feet long. Secondly, none of the big frills and horns and spikes on it. It's got a little bump on his nose, and that's about it. And would mostly run around on his back legs, so he's kind of bipedal. Still has the beak at the front, but it is purely herbivorous. So it'd be great for munching through all kinds of household rubbish food items. You could give it almost anything vegetarian, and it would probably be quite happy with that.
How much do we know about how big its appetite was?
Not too much. Aquilops is known only from a single skull, so we don't have a ton of it, unfortunately, though the head that we do have is really, really nice. They mostly have this very grinding dentition for relatively tough stuff, so they'd probably like a lot of woody stems and things like that. But again, that's really common
Alpen. Probably feed it Alpen.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing. Yeah, I'm sure at that size they'd be happy with some berries and fruit. Stuff like that is usually very important for small herbivores.
But imagine the farts, Dave. I mean,
necessarily. Well, for a start, they're not very big. I mean, they'd be better than your average dog, I think, for that point of view.
That is true. And also, it's good to sort of remind everybody now how more metabolically efficient a lot of herbivorous dinosaurs were. Although, because it's a small one, this might not be as... It's
the big ones that are super efficient. So these are probably still, inverted commas, warm-blooded. So they're pretty active. They're not going to be your usual reptile and just sleep all day, but their diet's going to be more iguana-like than anything else. So pretty easy.
Could you train it to poo in a corner or something?
I'd be surprised if you couldn't. I mean, most animals. I mean, if this is something that comes up, we're getting off topic. But the intelligence of animals and how smart are they? Obviously, we don't really know that, and you can't really work it out.
And also, some were more stupid than others within the species.
Definitely, but it's also partly just an issue of training. Sheep are not particularly smart. But you watch something like Babe, and a professional animal trainer with real time, and he's got them marching around in groups, shoulder to shoulder, and following all these complicated directions. So if you can do that to sheep, I'm pretty sure you can get a dinosaur to poo in the corner.
A dog can do that to sheep.
But if you...
Well, I say I've got no experience of dinosaurs at all, but I did in my series Mapmen, where me and Mark Cooper-Jones talk all about the world's most exciting and funniest and silliest maps. we talk about the map of Pangaea that was first proposed by Alfred Wegener back in 1915. He was the first person to discover, or at least come up with the idea of, continental drift. And apparently one of the things that helped him to prove his theory was the fact that he was looking around digging for fossils and found matching fossils that had drifted many, many miles apart. And the example we come up with in the episode is we say that they found evidence of the Lystrosaurus in Africa, Antarctica, and India. Now, we got in a bit of trouble for this. We said Lystrosaurus was a dinosaur, and that's because I suppose like a lot of people, I thought if it ends in saurus, it must be a dinosaur, and if it's extinct, it must be a dinosaur. So my question is, I should have asked this before. First of all, sorry, and second of all, what was a Lystrosaurus?
So, yeah, Lystrosaurs are very cool animals, and they're one of these. You're absolutely spot on that Lystrosaurus was a critical argument for continental drift. It and a handful of other fossils were things that were, turning up on these odd bits of continents that only make sense when you put continents back together, like east coast of South America and west coast of Africa. Suddenly that works when you plug them back together. It's like, how could they get to Africa, but they couldn't get to Brazil from Argentina? That sounds ludicrous. Well, it makes more sense when you realise that those two things were next to each other.
Also, the fact that even from far away, they just look like they match. It's like the most obvious and most enticing piece of the jigsaw.
Yeah, particularly those two. It does look like, but they just go together like that. But yeah, Lystrosaurus was a squat little pig-like animal, it's been described as, because it was probably rooting around and eating tubers and tough plants, and if it came across an insect or an early mammal or frog, it would have probably chowed down on that as well. Kind of squat body, squat legs, like a perhaps oversized corgi with a relatively fat tail, scaly, possibly with some filaments and maybe even early fur things, because they're actually on the mammal side of the branch and not on the reptile side of the branch. So they're not ancestors of, but they are very early relatives of mammals. From a time when reptiles and what would go on to become mammals were really quite similar to each other, which is why they were fundamentally scaly and would have looked reptile-like, and why they have saurus as their name suffix. But Lystrosaurus dominated the planet. There's this period in the Permian. This is the period before the Mesozoic where the dinosaurs lived, and the Permian was just like, it's just Lystrosaurus. It's just Lystrosaurus, 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 Lystrosaurus. This thing was absolutely everywhere and in colossal numbers. I remember a friend of mine telling me years ago, he was out in the Karoo Basin in South Africa, where they're really famous from, and he'd been asked to pick up a couple of skulls for his museum, and he was out there doing something else. He went, oh, okay, I'm told they're quite common. And he said, he's got out the car in a good spot, walked around, said after 5 minutes he found this really nice Lystrosaurus skull, so carefully wrapped it up, shoved it in his bag, and 5 minutes later he found another one. 5 minutes later he found another one. He said after about an hour he found like 8. So he had to sort through them to decide which were the 2 or 3 best ones to take back. So they were just that common. Tens of millions of years before the dinosaurs existed.
I really wish I'd known that when we made our video. We came from a place of such ignorance that not only did we call the Lystrosaurus a dinosaur, we actually, on the day when we were filming, we mispronounced it and we said Litosaurus. And if you watch the video very carefully, you can see it's been dubbed. The one time when Mark looks at the camera and says the word Lystrosaurus on camera, watch his mouth very carefully. He didn't say it. He said Litosaurus, and we had to do a bit of magic ADR.
Excellent. Oh, I didn't spot that.
Wow.
Thank you for putting us right.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So small addendum to that. So my PhD supervisor, a guy called Mike Benton, years ago was like the consultant on a BBC Big Horizon documentary on Lystrosaurus, and in particular the Permian extinction. So at the end of the Permian and leading into the Mesozoic, we have the greatest mass extinction of all time, and this is an area Mike's an expert in. And they wanted to make a special show about this, and they were using Lystrosaurus as like this keystone animal, because it actually survives. It gets over the boundary. It's so numerous and perhaps planet-wide that it was able to find some pockets to cling on and makes it into the Mesozoic. And Mike had to kind of describe this animal at the fairly last minute, because obviously they hadn't bothered to speak to him until they'd recorded and videoed everything, and described it as largely as I did. It's like it kind of pig-like. if you want an idea of its kind of squat body shape and size and general behaviour. And then Mike was horrified to discover, and you can find this, it is still available, or at least I've seen the clip, and Horizon, title, When Pigs Ruled the Earth. That's what they called the show about the Permian. And he's just like, oh no, that's not what I said.
No, it's
that's
not
what I meant.
You've just given me an amazing idea for a film franchise that might just do better than Jurassic Park.
You want to see Razorback in that case. It's an Australian horror film from about 1985 about a giant pig eating people in the Australian outback. The model for which was then recycled for Jurassic Park to make a walking triceratops that never made it into the film.
Have you seen a film from about 10 years ago called The Happening, where the trees get angry and get revenge on mankind?
I am aware of it. I haven't watched it. It's supposed to be quite awful, isn't it?
It's awfully amazing. I'll say nothing more. Go watch The Happening.
I shall enjoy it.
Amazing. Well, Jay, have we answered all of your various dinosaur questions? Are you pleased?
And Listosaurus questions.
You've answered.
Someday you can too. I knew that my life was now better. You and I will meet someday you can too. I knew that my life was now better. You and I will meet someday you can too. I was better. I will meet and I will meet someday you can. Someday you can too. I knew that my life was now better. You